What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy YouTube channel. We're back with another freshman spotlight. What we like to do is go through college football week in and week out, and what freshman out there is kind of popping off, and we can say, hey, he's increasing his value there. Today, we're going for a freshman that not a lot of, casuals might know about, but that's Kevin Concepcion, or Casey Concepcion, however you want to go with his first name there. And he's an NC State wide receiver, and he's absolutely become a dual threat rushing slash receiver that's really been a pivotal player for NC State and really popped off out of nowhere. When we're looking at the recruiting rankings, he was pretty much outside the top 50 in most places and kind of towards that 100 mark in terms of that. So what we like to do on these episodes, we'll go through his recruiting profile. We're going to go through his season, look at his advanced stats from PFF. Then we're going to be diving into his outlook, his future outlook based on his roster, based on the depth chart recruiting class coming in and what we can expect from him. So hit that like and subscribe button. I'll catch you on the other side. All right, let's get into his recruiting profile. I always like to do this just to kind of talk about, where was he ranked? Where can we find these guys, these maybe diamonds in the rough? And, when you're looking at the industry rankings across the board, On3 had him as wide receiver 111, 247 Sports 96, ESPN 129. But shout out Rivals. Rivals had him as wide receiver 50. That's the highest of all of these guys and a 4-star. So they were a little bit ahead of them. That's why that wide receiver 91 overall ranking there got bumped up a little bit. But outside of that, when you're looking at the cycle, he was essentially a fringe top 100 player at the position, right? When you just go to his scouting, a lot of people didn't even talk about him in terms of, scouting ability. Like they didn't even have it on there. He chose NC State over North Carolina, Florida State, those areas in there. But as a player, he came in a little light, but we'll talk about what he looks like now. But hey, shout out him from North Carolina. He kind of, he popped off. And this is those diamonds in the rough, those guys that we talk about, like, hey, where can we find these guys? If you're playing Devy, how can you find these values? And it's something like we talked about with Eugene Wilson too. Like these guys that are primarily in the slot, that are special athletes that can create separation and have speed, you need to start looking at those guys, right? Maybe we go away from the 6'4", 220 guy, and we start looking at recruiting profiles that fit like Concepcion and some of these other guys that we're talking about. Now, when we go over kind of what he's done in terms of just the numbers this year, he's looked good, right? So 5'11", 187. So he's come in and put on some weight. That's why like his high school recruiting weight at 160 shocks me a little bit. But we've seen that. By the numbers, 73.9 receiving grade, really good. Only 4 drops. And again, based on the targets that we've seen from him, over 70 targets. That's not bad. Now, where does he really line up? The slot percentage. 93.8% is where he's at. So when we're thinking of like what the NFL is going to and what we think of like projection-wise from the next level, he fits this, right? Concepcion fits this. And that's what we're trying to do here. And just try to highlight some players that fit that value and fit those guys that we like to see there. He's a big part of that. So you have to give him credit for what he's doing there. 8 out is 8.0. He does have some throws behind. We're going to look at those numbers as well behind the line of scrimmage, which takes that down a little bit. But rushing upside too, 27 carries, 242 yards. We've seen he had 86 rushing yards against Wake in that win. Virginia Tech, 44 yards rushing. And they on a 4-game win streak. And a big part of that reason is for him. 4 touchdowns in that span. When you're looking at his numbers, over 200 yards receiving and over almost 200 yards rushing in that span as well. He's looked phenomenal these last few games. And you have to, big part of NC State's success has been him. Now, when we go over just kind of looking at what his numbers look like at a depth, right? So what I like to do here is where is he getting those targets from? So when you look here from the depth, perspective of how deep he's coming, 15 targets of 20 or plus. That's not bad. So you're a big play guy. So he's in the slot, but they're using him as that big play threat guy. And that's good to see. So 17% of his target percentage is going there. We do see in the medium as well. But, where he's kind of eating right now is that short percentage, right? 0 to 9 yards, 43% target percentage, 27 receptions. Really, really good. And that's the thing you're going to see from him is that I think he can be a deep threat. But his ability to create separation and just kind of do those things, especially at that short yardage area, is what makes him special. Like, not a lot of guys from a mismatch perspective, they get him in that slot and man, defenses struggle. And you watch it out there, you watch it on the tape, you'll see it. They don't know how to guard this kid. And when you want, if you really want to pause the video and kind of break down his other numbers there, I mean, they go all the way through it. Short right is really kind of where you go. Short center, they really try to get him across and routes across the middle, just create him in space and really just take him out that way. That's what they're looking for with Concepcion. And that's the value. Like, that's his value. And that's where teams are going to really highlight himself at the NFL level too. Get him out in space, get him over the middle, and just go let him do work. And if he can excel, remember, he's still learning that the position. He came in pretty raw. NC State sitting at 7-3, 4-2 overall. Like, and with the quarterback situation, it's a little weird right now. MJ Morris is my guy. I like MJ Morris, but he took his red shirt, so he's got Brennan Armstrong thrown to him now. What is that going to be looking like next year? I think that's the question that you have to look at. But from his numbers here, you'll see where he does well, but I do love the fact that his receiving grade deep is something that you don't usually see with his kind of a profile. And when you look at his receiving grades, I mean, almost all across the board, 90s, 80 for the deep passing and receiving grades. That's a really, really good score. Now, as far as the Devy outlook, when we're talking overall, scheme, I like him because they're going to use him. When you're looking at overall who they have in that wide receiver room, no one that great. I think Concepcion is probably their best wide receiver. I do know when you're looking at it overall, like, the next closest guy for receiving yards, Terrell Timmons, 194 yards. I mean, that's ridiculous for a true freshman to have. So from an offensive scheme and depth chart perspective, from the wide receiver room, it's his room. He's going to take it. He's going to earn the targets. He should be a target. A lot of people, if they play college fantasy, but I love the fact that he's kind of already taken that room as a true freshman. I think the biggest question will be his quarterback position. Brennan Armstrong is gone. Is MJ Morris coming back? I know his dad came out because his dad's one of those dads that gets involved, said, we're just taking our red shirt because we want to keep that year of eligibility. You have Brennan there. We'll continue to learn from him and we'll be back. The Morris thing has been weird for NC State. I hope that he comes back and he doesn't, burn that red shirt. Obviously, you wanted to keep that red shirt for a reason. Maybe someone comes out and makes him an offer. Part of me thinks MJ stays just because, when you're looking at what he did last year, a lot of people thought he was going to leave last year and he didn't. And he stayed stuck around. Even with Brendan Armstrong coming there, it was just weird because they beat Clemson. It's just a weird kind of thing. So that's something to know. If the quarterback situation changes, with Ethan Rhodes there, Lex Thomas, if MJ Morris doesn't come, then I think that is a red flag. Like, okay, maybe we should see a dip, but there's no one really there to really throw it to, though. So, like, it's weird. It's a weird situation in NC State. Now, as far as their 2024 class, they have Terrell Anderson coming in. He's a number 25 rated wide receiver, 6'3", 184. So that doesn't hurt, I don't think, in terms of Concepcion's like upside with the wide receivers coming in. Jonathan Paylor is an athlete, kind of sitting at that 5'9", 170. So is Ronnie Royal, but depending on where they play, I think the position that they pick there. They do have Cedric Bailey, a quarterback, a 3-star kid. He's 6'6", 185. That's kind of the future in terms of that. I don't think he's ready to go. He's a little raw. Jibber Boston is their wide receiver coming in. Christian Zachary, again, all these wide receivers that they have coming in, I wouldn't necessarily think it's a threat for Concepcion in terms of they have the 31 overall ranked class. So you have to like that from just a perspective of they are recruiting well. And again, this coach is going to stay there based on the record. And we see there, what is his outlook? I think, from his perspective, he fits what the NFL wants. Slot guy to create space, and he's kind of a deep threat too. They use him in the backfield. They use him in shotgun. They're going to use him as a running back. He's a lot of fun. I love watching him. And we see these guys like Rondale Moore and some of these other guys, depending on the offenses they find themselves in, he's a name that you really, really need to know. I think Concepcion is one of those guys that could kind of take that next step in the next level. But I think he's going to also ball out next year, especially if MJ Morris comes back. NC State fans, you guys should be excited. He's an absolute stud, and you guys got a great one. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll check you guys next time.